welcome back to They Did What? Your source for the internet's craziest, most entertaining stories, where I go over them, analyze them, and most certainly make fun of them. This evening, I'll be covering part 5 of the story. A wife of 7 years opened our marriage without my knowledge, has breakdown when I toss her and the suitcase out. And guys, you've been following this all afternoon into the early evening here, and again, I'm not going to recap the whole story, but where he left off. The guy met with his mom, and the mom spilled the beans on what the lunch with the very soon-to-be ex-wife, where she admitted to all these things about the affair and blamed her mom for putting the idea in her head that it's okay to cheat, to get out of her system, blah, blah, blah. And then he called his wife's boss to tell him that what was going on, that his wife was cheating with that dude, but only after the boss told him about his wife cheating with the other guy, blah, blah, blah. So, anyhow, this guy's now continuing on with his story here, because remember, this is 3 parts of a very long freaking email, hence part 3, 4, and 5. So, jumping back into the story, he says, so I went on to get the STD test done, and I went to meet my uncle at a deli nearby my work. Anyone who's seriously considering reconciliation without a cheating wife should listen to what my uncle has to say. Everybody has that wise uncle. Except most people don't listen to their wise uncle. Mine was my godfather, may he rest in peace. And he was awesome. He was a man's man, a guy's guy, an old school guy. Didn't take shit from anybody. He will convince you that reconciliation is never an option. Well, shout out to the uncle. My uncle is a couple years younger than my father, but looks 15 years older. I barely recognize him now. After pleasantries, he said my father told him I wanted to talk about his wife's infidelity. I was taken aback by his directness, but said yes. He said he understands I'm having a difficult time in my marriage and I'm looking for advice. I nodded. He said he's not going to ask for details, but has one question. Did Beth tell me she lied to me to protect me? I said yes. He said after 27 years, that's what still bothers him the most. That his wife would tell him that she deceived him about her affair for his own good. I'd be like, bitch, I can determine what's for my own good, not you. He is still trying to figure out what that good was. All these years later, he still wonders how many lies my aunt, his wife, had told him for his own good. He shook his head in absolute disgust. Here's what my uncle had to say. He and my aunt had been married for about 6 years when 27 years ago, his wife began an affair with a married neighbor, a stay-at-home dad. It began as play dates for their young children and ended up as play dates for my aunt and the neighbor. The guy's wife discovered them and told my uncle. My uncle was furious, saw a lawyer, and started the divorce proceedings. They remained in the same house with the kids but in separate bedrooms. My aunt convinced him that it only happened a few times, that she loved my uncle, was sorry, and would do anything to save the marriage. Sounds about right. My uncle believed that she was genuinely remorseful, or at least that she didn't want to divorce. They had 2 small kids, and he didn't want his kids to grow up in a broken home. This is the age-old story here. The guys really don't want to divorce. They don't want to hurt the kids. They don't want to go through all that, get hammered in the divorce, which they would, and somehow convince themselves that the wives are sorry. They'll change. Never happen again. Whatever. Or maybe some guys will convince themselves that maybe he did something wrong. It's a shame. He'd been looking around the restaurant everywhere, but at me while he talked. He stopped and stared at me. He said he really stayed for the kids, but that was a mistake. Both his adult children are now divorced. Both their spouses divorced them because neither of his 2 kids were ever emotionally present in their marriages. My uncle believes that his kids divorced because they have no idea what a healthy marriage looks like. Amen. This is why I say all the time, it's better to break up, to divorce. And even though I get people that hate on me for that, because the kids are going to see mom and dad in a marriage that they either don't love each other at all and barely talk, or hate each other's guts and there's fighting and drama. And those kids are very likely to end up in relationships like that, because I think that's what it's like. Right here. His marriage with my aunt certainly hasn't been a healthy one. Much of the time, he and his wife barely talked. His kids were the same in their marriages. What'd I tell you? I know some marriages that have turned out like this. No joke, guys. Anyway, he and my aunt decided to reconcile. They wasted 6 months and a lot of money on marriage counseling. He only continued with the therapy because my aunt said it was helping her. But the therapy was a total waste of time for him. Wasn't a total waste of time for him either. The therapist convinced his wife that she had to be completely honest, so he learned some things. Oh joy. Some things obviously he probably didn't know about her prior to the I do's. They began therapy to figure out what was missing in her, him, or their marriage that made his wife cheat. The root cause of her betrayal. He learned the deep, dark psychological reason his wife cheated on him. That was his wife simply wanted to sleep with the neighbor. End of story. That's it. So she did. She suppressed trauma and needed years to uncover. Trauma, huh? Or, excuse me, guys. My bad. No suppressed trauma that needed years to uncover. She did it because she enjoyed it. His wife admitted to the therapist that she and the neighbor would have continued to hook up if they hadn't been caught. See? They're not sorry, they're just sorry they got caught. He also learned during therapy that when his wife told him that she and the neighbor were only together a few times, she really meant that they were only together a few months. A little over 8 months, numerous times a day. 8 months, numerous times a day. Do the math here, guys. That's a lot of sex. The guy probably slept with his wife more in those 8 months than he did in the entire 6 years they'd been married at the time. He looked him in the eye and said not to believe anything my wife tells me. His wife's original confessions were mostly lies to make her look better or telling him that what he already knew of her affair. Beth will also lie to me. You're darn right about that. Listen to the wise uncle here. He asked if he and I were talking because I wanted to know if he ever got over her cheating. Did he? He said yes and no. He believes that she was sincerely sorry for cheating. Bullshit. He believes that she hasn't cheated on him since the neighbor. Bullshit. But he's the same fool who believed that she would never cheat on him again. For the last 27 years, he never really trusted her. After he found out, for the longest time, he freaked out if she was a second late coming home or didn't answer the phone. Well, I think it's about time I smacked the uncle here. Smack for all this bullshit. Okay, fine. Once the kids were out of the house, you could divorce the bitch. Come on, man. Yes, he's giving his wisdom here, but, practice what you preach, uncle, He was constantly checking up on her. They had fights over where she's been, what she's been doing, and who she's talking to. That she might still be cheating consumed his every waking minute and kept him up at night. He agonized over what he would do if he caught her again. He was terrified of finding out that she was still cheating, but also terrified of not finding out. It was eating him up inside. He was also going crazy, so for his own sanity, he eventually stopped caring about what she did. Does that sound like a happy life to you guys? And what he's basically telling our guy here in the story is, don't be me. Don't make the mistake I did. End it. Because otherwise you're always going to be looking over your shoulder, sleeping with one eye open. I mean, obviously this happened 27 years ago. Back then that was more frowned upon and less common, not uncommon, but less common to divorce. And now his kids are screwed up. He tuned out of their marriage. He said, I'm probably wondering why he stayed married. She's his full-time housekeeper and cook, and they still get it on. But after 27 years, he still wonders if she's comparing him to the neighbor. The good thing about their marriage is that he does whatever the hell he wants to, and my aunt can't say shit about it to him. The only good thing. We finished lunch, paid, and went outside. So he said if he had to do it again, he would never have stayed in the marriage. It wasn't good for his kids, but for him or my aunt. He should have divorced her and taken the financial and emotional hit. Instead, he had a lifetime of financial and emotional hits. Before saying goodbye, he asked me if I got what I wanted from our talk. I said yes and thanked him. I thought to myself, here's a guy who's been waiting 27 years for a wife who he thought he married, the one who would never cheat, to magically appear and replace a cheating wife he actually married. Yeah, not going to happen unless you find a fucking magic lamp and rub it and the genie gives you that. Ain't going to happen, dude. I got an email from Beth saying that she will take the job and is looking for a therapist but does not want to separate. Back to Beth. She wants to come home to prove to me that she'll be the perfect wife from now on. I emailed her back my terms for even thinking about reconciliation. I want her to sign over her share of the house to me immediately. It was my money that paid for it. She has to sign the post-nut that stipulates that each of us gets only what's in our own name in a divorce. She takes a polygraph. We will need to sign a separation agreement that reflects these terms. This is all in an email, huh? And so he's just waiting to see what she has to say in that email. Fuck you! I've since blocked Beth, but not her father. He called me, and I wondered if he knew what his wife encouraged his daughter to cheat on me, and that she claimed that all the wives she knew are unfaithful to their husbands. Anyway, I missed that part, guys. Clearly I didn't have enough coffee this morning that this guy should be telling his wife's dad about what his wife has to say. Because obviously she's cheating on him. I thought about telling him, but I figured I'd settle my stuff first and then tell him about his wife later. Her family asked me why the separation and the terrible terms I'm demanding. Terrible terms? Hey, your daughter said she'd do anything to get me back. It sounds like I'm going to divorce Beth, and I just want to screw her in the divorce. I almost told him that it's now someone else's job to screw Beth, but I held my tongue. Instead, I said I may divorce her, but I'm willing to consider reconciliation. I can see that it might be possible, but it will take a while, if ever, for me to ever get over what Beth did to me. Remember, guys, this is bullshit. He's saying this on purpose so he can get the better deal long term. That was covered in part 3. I asked her why Beth is having him negotiate with me. She told me she'd do anything I asked, and now her father is saying that she won't. I told him I want to make it crystal clear. If she doesn't agree to my terms, all of them, I'll serve her with divorce papers. They're already been prepared. If she agrees to my terms, we'll put in the separation agreement. Neither of us can initiate a divorce for at least 1 year. That will give me time to figure out what I want. We have to take it slow. I don't want to see her right now, maybe after a while. We can start dating and go from there. But it's straight to divorce if she doesn't agree to what I want. He said, I'm not leaving Beth much choice. I told him Beth didn't leave me much choice. For God's sakes, Dad, stop making out your daughter to be some kind of, victim here. This is her fault. Sounds like her dad needs my channels. I received Beth's response by email the next day. Oh, let's see what this is. She wants to do everything I ask, but we agreed that we would also start working on reconciliation. She should move back in the house, and then we can discuss what to do about the house and the post-nup. Nope. You ain't moving back until we do the post-nup. But we should put off the polygraph. I knew that was happening. I already knew the worst, that she planned to cheat with Tom. If we wait a few months to do the polygraph, I'll see that she hasn't even thought about cheating since. But the house and the post-nup are certainly worth a conversation. That should be a priority once she returns home. Nope. There's no reconciliation of you moving back in until the post-nup and all the documentation to prove that. And you sign the house to me. I didn't respond to her. I called my attorney the next day and asked how the documents for the post-nup, deed transfer, and separation agreement were coming. He said they were almost ready and suggested we send copies to Beth to look over. We don't want her saying that she didn't have a chance to read them thoroughly, so she didn't understand what she was signing. I told him to go ahead. He said she'd have them shortly. Very good idea. Take your time and read them. If she was smart, she would have an attorney read them. That was 6 days ago. I'm not going to go through all the emails from her. There were a ton. Beth kept saying that she wants to come home before signing anything. Then she said she gave the paperwork to a lawyer to look over, and the lawyer says not to sign anything. Of course. Her lawyer says she should move back home and we should begin marriage counseling. After all, Beth didn't really cheat on me. She didn't go through with it. Bullshit. Just because she wasn't, according to her, rolling in the hay with the guy, which I think she was anyway, she was still, the whole process of planning all this was the cheating. I should give her some time and credit, and that she came to her senses before things with Tom went too far. She knows I'm angry about how her crazy plans and the idiotic things she said to me. She understands how badly she's behaved and how much she hurt me. Yeah, I can tell how much she can tell. That will never happen again. Again, we have another Pinocchio moment. Pinocchio's nose is growing, and fucking like branches are coming out of it, and a bird's nest, and like the movie Pinocchio. Can she come home? I really can't legally help keep her out of the house, but she doesn't want to force herself on me. She wants me to be comfortable with having her back home. I wonder if she's staying away because she's afraid of me. Good. I didn't respond to any of this. I guess because I didn't respond to her emails, her father called me once again. His pitch was that Beth didn't really cheat on me. Her dad's a fucking simp. Men whose wives actually do cheat get over it and have successful marriages if they're willing to work on their relationship. What do you want to bet this father knows that his wife cheated on her and he was a jackass that stayed? They eventually forgive their wives' indiscretions. Beth went crazy for a while and listened to some really bad advice, but she didn't cheat. Beth isn't signing anything until she comes back home. Well, okay, then I'm serving Beth. End of story. There's a lot Beth and I need to work through, and that we can include a discussion of the house and the post-op if I want. But there are more important things that Beth and I need to work out. This is all from her fucking dad. As for the polygraph, they're not accurate and a waste of time and money. He finished by telling me that all my demands and conditions are just roadblocks and I'm putting in the way of going forward with our marriage. I should be working on our marriage, not making everything more difficult. Do not take anything that this father-in-law has to say. He is a whipped puppy. He's a simp. Obviously, his wife cheated on him for a long time, and he obviously knew about it and still stayed. Nope. The dad really pissed me off. I asked him who gave Beth the bad advice. He said he doesn't know. Maybe one of her friends or her coworkers. I said it was his wife. She told Beth that it was okay to cheat on me. His wife also assured Beth that all the wives she knows cheat on their husbands. It's possible my mother-in-law is one of those cheating wives. I told him not to worry. I'm sure that he'll get over his wife's infidelity and have a successful marriage if he just works on it. Now you're going to get the full thunder and fury of father-in-law now. That he will eventually forgive her indiscretions and all her future indiscretions too. He started yelling that I'm lying. His wife would never condone adultery and would never cheat on him. When he started calling me names, I hung up and blocked him, something I should have done much earlier. Good for you, bro. Beth sent me an angry email later that night. Oh, imagine that. After her father got off with me, her parents had a huge fight that lasted for hours. Her father has moved out. Yeah, we could all see that coming. Why didn't the wife move out? Beth says she told her mother about this stuff about her mother in confidence. Why couldn't either of us keep our big mouths shut? Well, Beth has been keeping her big mouth shut in more ways than one. It's bad enough that I'm threatening to divorce Beth over nothing, but now I've caused problems in her parents' marriage. Her mother caused a problem in their marriage. And trying to divorce Beth over nothing? You were cheating on me. I left a message with my lawyer telling him to serve Beth with the divorce papers. So she was served the next morning at her job. There you go. Beth went to my lawyer's office in the afternoon and signed the paperwork giving me sole ownership of the house, as well as a post-nup and our separation agreement. Wow, that came easier than I expected. She emailed me after she left my lawyer's office, and she accepted all my wishes, and to show me how important me and the marriage are to her. Wonderful, she signed everything. She knows the marriage is important to me too. I insisted that neither of us can initiate a divorce for a year in the separation agreement because I still love her and want her happy marriage back as much as she does. If I put that in the agreement because I'm afraid she might divorce me, I shouldn't worry. She's not going to divorce me, but that clause convinced her to sign all this stuff I wanted her to. I proved to her I really don't want a divorce. She's so arrogant that in her mind, in 1 year, she's going to have you wrapped around her little finger, eating out of the palm of her hand. That's what's going on in her mind, and she'll get more out of this and blah, blah, blah. That's what she's thinking to justify this. That's how overconfident she is. Why else would I make so sure no divorce is possible for at least a year? When we're back together, we'll throw all these unnecessary agreements in the trash. Beth didn't mention the polygraph in her email. My lawyer was right about the polygraph. Her ongoing refusal to take the polygraph told me all I need to know about Beth's past infidelity. Yep. One last thing, though. Beth sent me an email last Tuesday saying that she heard through the grapevine that Mr. Boss informed everyone in Beth's old office and Mrs. Boss will no longer be working for the company. Then Mr. Boss fired Tom. The grapevine says that Tom blames me for getting him fired. He thinks I told Mr. Boss about him and Mrs. Boss. So, fuck Tom. Mr. Boss has begun spreading it around that Tom was fired for behaving inappropriately with clients and that Mr. Boss expects several lawsuits. Tom's reputation is now shit everywhere. Well, if Tom wasn't hooking up with clients, and he's saying he is, and that could ruin his reputation as a realtor, then Tom can go after Mr. Boss. It's one thing for Mr. Boss to make it clear he was fucking his wife. No one will hire him because they're afraid of lawsuits. Beth asked if I was behind Tom's firing. I didn't reply to her, but figured that the grapevine really meant she heard all this directly from Tom. He also says, P.S. I wrote this update and was going to email it to you yesterday morning, but something told me to hold off one more day. I'm glad I did. Late yesterday afternoon, I got an email from Mr. Boss that contained pictures and what looked like a report. I read his email message and opened the picture file. The pictures were taken during a daytime, so they were fairly good quality. The first picture was of a woman in parking on a residential street. You couldn't make out the woman in the car, but it was Beth's Mercedes. The rest of the pictures were taken from the side and slightly behind. Enough from the side that it was clear that Beth was Beth in those pictures. The next picture was Beth knocking on the door of a house. Next was of Beth and Tom in the open door wearing just boxer shorts. Then them kissing in the doorway. Tom hands grabbing her ass. Then them kissing with Beth's hand down her front of Tom's boxers. The last was a picture of them and a little further back in the doorway. Tom was still facing Beth because Beth still had hold of Tom's package. Tom was smiling. There you go. I didn't believe for a second they were already hooking up. The report was from the PI, from the private investigator that Mr. Boss hired. I'll summarize. They followed Mrs. Boss last Saturday to the office. At noon, she left her car in the office parking lot and took an Uber to a nearby mall. They lost her at the mall. They think that she got into someone else's car while the PI was parking to follow inside the mall. They put people in her office and at her home to pick up some surveillance when Mrs. Boss returned to one of the two places. They still hadn't found Mrs. Boss when Tom left their office around 5:30 p.m. They decided to follow Tom to see if he met up with Mrs. Boss. They had a tracker of Mrs. Boss's car so they would know if she returned to the office for the car. They followed Tom home and decided to stay on Tom's house in case Mrs. Boss showed up there. Instead, an unidentified woman entered the house around 6:50 p.m. Mrs. Boss got her car and drove home after 11 p.m. Surveillance at Tom's house was called off. The unidentified woman was inside. So they're following Mrs. Boss, working for Mr. Boss, and go to Tom's house, and lo and behold, watching Tom, there is this guy's wife in her Mercedes. The email message from Mr. Boss said he hired a PI to tell Mrs. Boss Beth was caught up in the surveillance. The PI didn't know who Beth was, but they took pictures of Beth and Tom together because that's what they do. They take pictures. They wanted to document who was in Tom's house in case Mrs. Boss arrived. The pictures of Beth are from the Saturday of Labor Day weekend. They called Mrs. Boss with Tom for a hookup at the hotel on Labor Day. They were even able to get into the hotel room to take pictures of them together. Really? How? She'll soon be the ex-Mrs. Boss. He thanked me for the heads up about his wife and said he'll be returning to the favor. He hopes the pictures will help my divorce, so Beth has been keeping busy scratching that itch. And that is the end of part 5, and obviously this long-ass email that was in parts 3, 4, and 5. Of course, Beth has been hooking up with this guy and still is doing that, even though proclaiming her love for this guy wanted to get back together. Shocker. Anyhow, there you go. So, bro, continue to listen to your lawyer. Play the long game here. You got this evidence of her cheating. And, whether this is the last time I hear from you or I probably hear more, and something tells me, call it the powers of the force giving me insight to the future, that I'm going to hear more updates from you. And so you can let me know how things go. But in the meantime, keep playing it cool. Play the long game. Think your house. And you're going to be all right. All right, guys. That's it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. Be sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe. I'll catch you next time.